Long before St. Augustine became a city of tourists, it was a city of soldiers and sacrifice. Just south of downtown is one of the oldest military cemeteries in the United States. It is witness to one of America's most brutal and forgotten conflicts, the Seminole Wars. The Seminole Wars were not one war, but three, spanning nearly half a century, from 1816 to 1858. They were the longest and costliest Indian wars in U.S. history, and their story begins right here in Florida. When the United States acquired Florida from Spain in 1821, the Seminoles, a proud people descended from Creek refugees and freed Africans known as Black Seminoles, had already made this land their home. But as white settlers moved south, the federal government demand was clear: remove the Seminoles to Indian territory west of the Mississippi. The Seminoles refused.
During the Second Seminole War, the largest and deadliest of the three, St. Augustine became the nerve center of U.S. military operations in East Florida. The Castillo de San Marcos, once a Spanish fortress, was converted into a military prison. Captured Seminole leaders, including the great Osceola, were held here. Osceola was taken under a flag of truce in 1837, which went against custom and was a serious betrayal. He was imprisoned within these walls. Weakened by malaria, he died just months later at Fort Moultrie in South Carolina. But his capture symbolized the treachery and tragedy of this conflict.
The Second Seminole War dragged on for 7 grueling years. It was fought in the swamps, not in fields, against an enemy that could vanish into the scrub. Over 1,500 U.S. soldiers died, most not from battle, but from disease, heat, and exhaustion. St. Augustine became a staging ground, a hospital, and ultimately, a place of burial. Even before the Seminole Wars, St. Augustine had long served as a U.S. military outpost. In 1828, the Army formally designated the land beside the old Spanish St. Francis Barracks as a post-burial ground for soldiers stationed in East Florida. For years, it held the remains of servicemen who died while serving at this remote frontier post. But in 1842, as the Second Seminole War came to its bitter end, the cemetery took on far greater meaning. The U.S. Army gathered the remains of more than 1,400 soldiers who had fallen across the Florida wilderness, from the Withlacoochee to the Everglades, and reinterned them here in St. Augustine.
Their bones were laid together in a mass grave, and over them were built 3 coquina pyramids. These remember those who fought and fell in the swamps and hammocks of Florida. These pyramids mark the legacy of this sacred site, monuments to endurance and loss.
Decades later, in 1881, the St. Augustine Burial Ground was officially designated a national cemetery, one of the first in the United States. Today, more than 1,500 graves rest here, soldiers from every major American conflict since the Seminole Wars. Yet at its heart remain those 3 pyramids, which stand as a memorial and in remembrance to a war many have forgotten, but which changed Florida forever.
The Seminole Wars reshaped this land. They hardened the U.S. Army, displaced the Seminole people, and left behind a legacy of resistance that still endures in Florida today. St. Augustine, the nation's oldest city, became the keeper of that memory. Its national cemetery reminds us that America's story was written not only by explorers and dreamers, but by those who fought and fell far from home. In the silence of these pyramids lies a message from history, that even the oldest city in America was built not only of coquina stone, but of sacrifice.